Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Don't Get a Therapist Yet. And today, my special guest is Cam Harris. Cam, it's so lovely to have you on this show. And would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more so people know all about you?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
It's
Really
my pleasure.
appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. My name's Cam Harris. I am an EMDR therapist and a specialist in that modality. I'm
Hmm.
also a master hypnotherapist.
Wow,
And aside from that, I'm a mum, a
lovely,
stepmom, a wife, and a general kind of happy-go-lucky person.
lovely.
Um, I was prior to being a therapist in the fashion industry,
Wow,
and I was in that industry for a long time.
excellent.
And anyone who understands that industry knows it's high paced and high stress. And during my journey in the fashion industry, I actually had EMDR therapy for
Wow.
some stress that I was feeling and anxiety. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And at the time, I had a wonderful therapist who took me on this amazing journey. And EMDR changed my life. It made
Wow.
such a huge difference that I
Um,
retrained, became a therapist, and interestingly, during my training, my trainer said to me, "This is the best job in the world," and I honestly can tell you it is. It's the
oh,
most amazing experience to be able to have the journey with lots of people in healing.
yeah. Yes.
So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's really good to have your honesty to say that, you have experienced EMDR yourself and it's
Mm,
changed your life.
mm.
And I just want to start a little bit, Cam, it's okay with you, just sort of, what could you tell us a little bit what EMDR is? Because people often get sort of struggle with the name because it doesn't mean anything, does it? And actually what it's about. Could you just kind of just give us a little bit of an explanation?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you say that because often people will say to me, "Oh, that EDMR," and it's like, no, it's EMDR. So I hear you. EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It was created by Francine Shapiro following her own journey with mental health.
Yeah.
And she discovered that through eye movement, we could desensitize our feelings towards memories, perhaps memories that are stuck in their raw format, memories of trauma, painful memories. And that then sends a signal to our subconscious mind to reprocess those memories. Hence EMDR. Once it was called EMDR, they discovered that you could do it through bilateral movement. So you will find a lot of the EMDR therapists will use tapping,
Yeah.
shoulder tapping. We can do clicks as well. I work with some sports people and we can use a ball. There's
Mm.
lots of different ways to do the technique. When something bad happens, our mind kind of it sticks in our mind.
Mm.
And that feeling of being stuck in the memory and ruminating over the memories is quite overwhelming for a lot of
Mm.
people. And what EMDR does, you keep the memory, can't take the memory away, but the emotion related to that memory isn't there anymore.
Mm.
So you're not stuck in that feeling and you can move on. And the key thing with that as well is that emotion can sometimes come to surface with other things that happen,
Mm.
which takes you straight back to that memory.
Mm.
So that's where it's really effective. The
Mm.
emotion just isn't there and you're not triggered.
Mm.
And again, just to speak about my experience before, my husband also had EMDR
Mm.
and he's also a therapist now because it changed his life. His mother was she passed away from quite a serious illness, and he'd never used to be able to talk about her because it's too painful.
Mm.
Following EMDR, he can now speak about her, and I actually often will speak about things that I've not even heard, and I've been with him a long time. We've been together 25 years, and
Mm.
I'm hearing stories that I've never heard before. So it's quite amazing and powerful the way it works.
And I think you make so many good points there, Cam, because people often don't believe it can happen. They start off
Yeah.
therapy and they're sort of like, what is all this sort of, stuff and everything like that. And it takes quite a lot of bravery, I think, to go ahead and to do something like EMDR, because you have to sort of trust the therapist quite a lot and think of the memory as well, and that can be quite difficult, can't it? And to trust the sort of process, which sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? Always people always call I always say people always call EMDR the weird therapy. They say, "Oh, this is really weird," because they can't believe it's happening. They can't sort of believe the emotions are actually going away. It's quite an incredible therapy, I always think.
It is quite incredible. And to be quite frank about it, you have to be prepared
Mm,
to be connected to something that is painful. And pain is relative, everybody's different. One thing I always say to my clients, and I think having been on the other side, I can really relate to that feeling of accepting that that you need help, that
yes.
that plaster needs to come off.
Mm,
And that in itself can be traumatic for a lot of people. I mean,
mm,
I was certainly one of those people that, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I can keep going. I can keep going and keep pushing myself. And before you know it, your process is completely full and you shut down and your mind shuts down. But yeah, it can be. With the thing with the EMDR, we are connecting to the memory.
yes.
So it's not a take it lightly approach. You have to be prepared to connect to a memory, which for some people is incredibly difficult.
Yes.
Um, and it can be incredibly painful.
Yes.
But the feeling does go. If you
Yes.
want it to go, it does go. But you have to go through that period. It's a bit, I suppose the easiest way for us, if there's many women watching, if you're having a child, if you're a mum, you're having a
Mm,
child, you have to go through that whole gestation period. Then you have to give birth. Then you've got this lovely baby at the end.
mm,
It's quite similar to that in a way. You have
mm.
to go through that period. Um, but at the end of it does work and it is amazing. People do say, wow, I wish I'd done this sooner. And I can't believe the difference it's made.
And one of the reasons I do the podcast, Cam, and it's so good to have somebody like you as a guest, is to actually promote more of EMDR because a lot of people haven't heard about it and they don't know what it is. And I think it's growing in sort of popularity now, but it's still quite an unknown thing. So that's great. It's great that you're honest and say that you've experienced yourself and what a difference it's made. So you can really understand what it feels like for somebody in the room to come to you and to have all those sort of reservations and fears and worries about, what is this therapy and how it's going to affect me. You can really relate to people like that because you've gone through it yourself.
Yeah, and also I wasn't a great talker. So for me, talking therapy, I'm a great talker generally, socially, but talking about my emotions, having come from an Asian background where
Mm,
we had to kind of keep our emotions contained, everything.
mm,
And I don't think it's just an Asian background.
mm,
It's just that I'm relating to that because that's the community I've come from. You don't tell people how you're feeling. You just put a brave face on it, and everything's
mm,
like a Bollywood movie. That's
mm,
how it is. So talking about my emotions was not something I was ever encouraged to do. And the wonderful thing about EMDR, you don't actually have to talk about anything.
mm,
So you can sit there, I can talk you through the steps, but I don't need to know about the memory.
mm,
You can, as long as you can connect to the memory and you can connect to the feeling, it will still work. The process will
mm,
still work. And
mm.
I do have clients who, for whatever reason, private reasons, they don't want to tell me what's in the memory. And
Yes.
and that's okay. That's if that's
Mm,
your safe place to
yeah.
keep it private. Often what I find is they don't initially want to talk, and then as time goes on and the therapy starts to kind of take its place and things start to feel more comfortable, they'll openly sort of say, "Oh, by the way, this was what actually
Yeah.
happened."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's safety in knowing that you don't have to talk.
Mm.
I think for a lot of people.
And I think that's a really good point, Cam, again, because most people may have reservations about coming to therapy in the first place and what does it mean and not having control and everything like that. But I think what you're also saying is that there is some control that the person can actually make some choices. And I think if there's sort of like a shame-based memory where they feel ashamed for whatever reason, often say childhood trauma might, special sexual trauma might involve some sort of embarrassment and shame it's called blind EMDR, isn't it? Where they don't have to actually say anything, but actually giving them that little bit of choice to say you can control what you say is a really good thing, isn't it? And then I totally agree with you. What happens after a little while, they do feel more trust and they feel more open to share those things. And that can be actually quite therapeutic just to sort of say it out loud to somebody as well. But actually knowing that they don't have to at the beginning is quite a nice thing for people to know about EMDR.
Mm. It's important for EMDR, but it's also the kind of therapist I am. I like to
Yes,
work at the pace that the client
yes,
wants to work at. The
mm,
experiences that I've had is the therapy will work if you want it to work, but it will also work if you feel in control to some degree.
yes,
So to work at the pace of the
mm,
person in front of you is really important. I don't
yes.
follow a textbook. I
No,
say this to anybody who I do a consultation for 10-15 minutes free of charge to see if that connection is there.
yeah.
That's really important because
Mm,
if the person in front of me doesn't have that connection with me, their
mm,
subconscious mind won't give us anything.
mm,
It won't get there. So that part is really important. And one
mm,
of the first things I'll say to any client or to anyone who's even thinking of any therapy is that you should always feel a level of control
good.
because you should always feel safe. And
Yes.
the safer you feel, the more you feel that you have a voice to do
Mm,
things at your pace,
mm,
the more therapeutic the experience is going to be.
mm,
I have heard some stories, as you can imagine, of people
mm,
doing therapies where they've been pushed to do things
mm.
before they've been ready, and
Yeah.
actually that's made them regress. It's made
Yes.
them almost go into themselves more. So it's really important to
Yeah.
give people that space to decide. And I often will say, look, if there's something you don't feel comfortable about and you don't want to say, just put your hand up.
Mm.
And I know that's the signal that
Yes.
we have to pause.
And it's good that people know your values as well, Cam, isn't it? If people are considering having therapy with you and would like to sort of explore that, knowing that that's one of your core values in therapy is that you wait for people to be ready, that they have some control, you're very respectful of people's feeling in control in the session and there's a process there and there's a connection there. That's a really good thing for people to hear because like you say, unfortunately, not everybody's experience of therapy has been good and that's good that you allow people that time and that space to process what in their own time when they feel ready and they feel right and they've got some control over that. That's really good,
Yeah,
isn't it?
again, I think, thank you. I think that's also having been in that space.
Mm.
And interestingly, my husband and I, we both, when we had EMDR, we both had it on the same day and with the same therapist, who was a really great guy, actually, 2 hours apart. And I
Wow.
came out and felt completely different. I came out as if I always describe this to people as I came out as if I had a cloud. I don't know if anybody plays Mario Kart or if you know Mario Kart, there's a cloud that you can
Okay.
give to it. I came out feeling like that cloud had been given to me. My husband came out and he was like walking on air. The experience was completely different. Therefore, I think it is really important to give people autonomy to say, look, I'm not ready for this, or this is going too fast for me, because their response can be very different to the next person's response.
Yes.
We're not robotic, we're human beings, and
Absolutely.
that is important. But again, I think that goes down to my own personal experience with the therapy and how I felt after having it, and seeing how my husband felt after having it makes you more aware that okay, there are differences in how we process information and process trauma, particularly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very much so. So I think what you're saying is EMDR is a really good uh, therapy for trauma. And would it be for any type of trauma? What sort of what were your thoughts there? Is it for the person to choose to say, I think this is something which will help with my trauma? Any kind of sort of guidance as to does it work with any
Yes.
trauma?
Well, I hadn't planned to bring these to the conversation today, but now that you've asked, so we have these big
Oh,
T's,
yeah,
big
I like that.
traumas. I've not quite got around to painting this because I've been quite busy, but I haven't yet decided what colour it's going to be painted. But big T's are what we are conditioned to believe trauma is. So when we hear the word trauma, and I will ask every client if they feel they've experienced trauma, when we hear the word trauma, we are naturally, I think, in terms of the society that we're in and culturally, we are naturally led to believe that trauma is something extreme. It's a sexual assault, it's a first responder. Particularly when we talk about EMDR, there is this feeling that it must involve PTSD, soldiers, and there's all this side of it. However, we have these little ones.
Mm.
And these little ones, and one of the biggest things I deal with, and I deal with it every week with people of our sort of generation, is bullying. Now,
Yes.
if you ask somebody in their mid 30s, 40s, 50s, have you, experienced trauma? They'll always think for the big things. But I deal with school bullying in people of that generation more than I do in most things.
Wow.
And they're like, when you connect them to the memory, they'll say, "Oh gosh, I can't believe it still affects me to that degree."
Mm.
And workplace bullying, it's amazing how those things you carry them through your life. So when we talk about trauma, we have big T's and we have little T's. Little T's could be for some people, particularly post-COVID, not being able to pay your mortgage. We've had all this economic change in such a short period of time, and we've been carrying on in our lovely little sort of space. Everything's been quite linear, and then all of a sudden, a politician has decided to do something. The interest rate's gone through the roof.
Yes.
What was comfortable now is incredibly traumatic. Putting food on the table, just being able to pay a mortgage. Some people have got second jobs. Now, you might not class that as a big T, you might class that as a small T, but these ones that build up and build up and build up equal that. They work differently. So trauma, EMDR can actually work for essentially anything that makes you feel unbalanced, makes you feel off center, because essentially that's what trauma is. Anything that makes you feel a negative response is trauma. And that can vary for people in their circumstances. And in my experience, and I didn't know when I went for EMDR, I didn't know why I felt anxious, but mine all went back to what you would class as a little childhood T. I didn't even know it was there, was because I was brought up in an Asian background. I had always heard the language that I needed to have an arranged marriage, that I needed to be, a female. As a female, needed to be a wife, and needed that's what my role was. And I didn't have an arranged marriage. I married outside of the community. My husband's white. He had a child from a previous relationship. So I literally broke every rule of the book, to be fair. And I didn't realise I was carrying that as trauma.
Yeah,
I felt
wow.
guilt, and I didn't think I felt guilt at all, because that was my choice. But I did. I felt that guilt of letting the family down and doing things in a way that I should not have done, that I'd been conditioned to believe I should do.
Yeah.
And that's where all my anxiety is coming from. So to go back to what you asked, yes, EMDR can help with lots of different traumas from lots of different backgrounds, but they don't have to be the extreme.
Yeah.
And they can be smaller.
Yeah, and that's such a good message, isn't it, Cam? Because I think you're right. Some people feel guilty about having a minor issue 5 years ago, but that's a really good example you gave. But they don't realize actually how much it's interfering with them now. Because it's small bullying at school. It's such a small thing. It was such a long time ago, but they're carrying that memory is what you're saying, and actually to be free of that memory is so freeing, isn't it? But so perhaps a reason for people to consider come to see you for therapy is not to think that it might be a small trauma, or it might be a long time ago, but it might still be affecting you very much now. But if you actually get and get some therapy around that, you'll feel so much better. You'll feel so much free to release yourself of that trauma and the beliefs around how it's affected you. And I'm sure so many people can relate to what you're saying, whether they're from an Asian community or not, that we carry these sort of beliefs and conditions around with us as children, that we should be this, we ought to be that, and everything like that. And just to break free from that must be so freeing for you. It must have been, like you
Yeah.
say.
I don't think it really matters which community we come
Yeah.
from, because essentially we all have the same structure of emotions. community aspects can change things, but I see it in my son. He had an incident at school where he was bullied, and I've seen how that's affected him. And actually, he has done a little bit of EMDR, not with me. And I don't think that would be appropriate for him, and it has helped him to manage that. And having seen how these things affect people, okay, over time maybe the effect doesn't feel as strong, but it's still there. You see it in certain behaviours, and I saw it with his behaviours, that he was responding to things slightly more aggressively than perhaps he would have done beforehand, because he had that pent up feeling of not being able to protect himself, and that's something that you can release through EMDR, through tapping, through the eye movement. There's lots of different ways to do it.
And I think, another point there is you because you're being a therapist, you notice your son suffering, you notice, he has experienced bullying, and you sort of dealt with it earlier rather than that trauma being laid there for years and years and years and affecting the person later on. You were able to release him from that experience much earlier on, so that bullying experience won't affect him for the rest of his life, isn't it? That's a really positive thing to do.
Yeah, if you release memories quite soon after the trauma happens, then you don't get that lasting effect. The mind process, because we process our memories through REM sleep, through sleep. When we're sleeping, our mind's doing its wonderful work. And the sooner you do it after the trauma happens, the more it will get processed. But the longer it sits there, the more it becomes a trigger. And that's what we try to. But there are, even with all this wonderful conversation around mental health, there are still, even for my son, there's like, I don't want to see a therapist, Mum. There's nothing wrong with me.
Yes.
And there is still this real stigma of being in a therapy room.
Yes.
And the world has changed hugely now compared to when we were growing up. But there is still this kind of, I don't want to be that kid in school that's in therapy. I just don't want to be.
Yeah.
There is still this feeling that there's something not quite right about doing therapy, and I think that might take some time to change.
Absolutely. I think people see it, oh, as you're admitting weakness, you can't handle things, something like that. If you go to therapy, it means you're weak. Whereas I always think, I'm sure you feel the same as this, Cam, it's very brave. Like we said, it's very brave to go to therapy and actually start to address these things, which are so distressing. It's completely different to what people think. I always respect people who come to therapy. I think good on you for wanting to deal with these things. Yeah.
We have a saying in our home, which is face your fears, live your dreams. And it's a saying that I think across the years we might have forgotten a little bit, but then you come out the other side and you remember that when we're scared of doing something, it's coming from a fear. It's coming from something that's holding us back. But everybody's journey is different, and just some people come from backgrounds where going to therapy is seen as weak. Men in particular, and I mean this respectfully to any man that's watching, there is this kind of, what are you seeing a therapist for? They just wouldn't want to admit to their friends that they're seeing a therapist. I think women, we talk to our friends when we go for a coffee, we talk about everything, so it's slightly more open. Men go down the pub or go to play sport and they all take the mick out of each other. So there's a cultural difference there in how therapy is viewed.
And actually, what I've also noticed is what people have told me is once they've told somebody they've had EMDR, it's often somebody else they've known has also had it, but they haven't wanted to admit it. So they actually find out more people than they realise have actually had EMDR themselves, but have never felt open enough to admit to it. So they're quite surprised how many people actually have had it now. So that's also quite interesting, but just don't speak about it.
Yeah, but it's interesting what you said earlier. I think it's becoming more known as a therapy, and where people are having it and they realise that they don't necessarily have to talk about what's happened, or they don't have to be drawn through I suppose, months and months and months of talking about the same memory over and over, they're becoming more open to sharing about it.
Mm,
I get a lot of clients from referrals because people have had a great experience and like, oh my gosh, it's really
mm.
quick. I'm not going to be in therapy for 2 years. I'm going to be in
Yes.
therapy for a few sessions and I'm going to feel
Yeah.
better. And
Yeah.
I might need to top up every 3, 6 months because something else has happened. But often I think for a lot of people, that thought of being in therapy for such a long period of
Yeah.
time can also be um, quite tiring. The thought of even
Yes.
doing that, going on that journey.
Yeah. You've brought up another really important point about EMDR actually there, Cam. I just want to emphasize that is another thing that people are quite surprised at how quickly you
Mm.
can work through a trauma as well, can't you? Sometimes one incident can be done in a session. I don't know, you would say a bit more about that yourself, but and then you can feel better about that particular incident in one session. I mean, what's your experience regarding the time frame? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, everybody's different. When I do the consultations, the question I wish I had that saying goes a pound for every time I get asked, how many sessions will it take?
Yes.
Well, it depends what we work with. I've only ever had this once. I've had a client that has cleared their trauma in one session.
Mm,
I've only ever had it once, and it's really uncommon. But that particular person came with very small numbers, one trauma that they had. Generally, though, it's going to take a few. If you do it holistically, therapeutically, and don't rush it, which I'm not a
mm,
fan of rushing through things. I prefer to be very thorough. You can get through 2 or 3 traumas in the first session because we
mm,
start from the smaller traumas. We
mm,
never start from the biggest one because the way EMDR works, we scale from 0 to 10. 10 being the highest, that's the one that affects me the most. There will never be a 0 on the page because the idea is to get everything down to a 0. So you might
mm,
have a 1, a 2, and a 3. We'd start with the lower ones. And
mm,
there's a couple of different reasons for that. Firstly, if we go straight to a 10, it's going to be incredibly tiring.
mm,
And you don't want your first session to be one trauma and you're like, oh my God, I can't go through that again.
mm,
So if we start with the lower ones, you kind of build yourself up
mm,
and you feel the impact of that relief and you think, oh
mm,
gosh, can't wait to get to the 10 now because I
mm,
can see what this has done for the 2 and the 3. But the other thing is we create space by releasing the emotion in the smaller memories. It creates space, which means by the time you get to the 10 doesn't feel like a 10, it actually feels like a 6 or a 7
mm.
because you've created space in your mind, process some of that memory already because some of the emotion might be connected. So yeah, it does work very fast.
Mm.
But again, it
Mm.
depends what's in front of us.
Of
Sometimes
course.
by clearing certain memories, other memories that have been repressed and suppressed come forward.
Mm.
So what textbook wise might look like a case that you're going to have, okay, 2 or 3 sessions.
Mm.
By the time you get to session 3, you've uncovered memories that have been buried. And then, okay, we've
Yes.
got another session or another 2 sessions.
Yeah.
The
Mm.
key is to always be thorough, as thorough as you can be, because
Mm.
we don't want those memories resurfacing.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. So, and that's a really good thing for people to understand. And again, going back to fear of therapy and, what's this weird EMDR thing, to actually start with something quite small, which isn't sort of too overwhelming or traumatic. I totally agree with that, Cam. And it kind of gives people a little bit of a sort of a little bit of a taster, doesn't it, of what EMDR can do. And
Mm.
then, 99% of times it actually works and it clears. And then people think, wow, like you say, once if I can do that with that one, what else can I do with all these other ones? But I think you're also describing it really well because you're sort of also educating people about trauma itself and says, yeah, other things might reoccur, other things might come. But once you feel as though EMDR works and you've experienced it working, I find people gain the confidence in it as well. As okay, well, if it worked with that memory, it can then work with that memory. Let's do that memory next. And they sort of get into the swing of it and they get very good at it as well. They actually get really quite good at processing and they sort of understanding and they accept the slight weirdness of it as well.
Yeah,
Does that
well,
make sense?
Yes, it does. And it happens with every client that we'll do the session one, the session two, they want to come and do a 10. I'm like, okay, now, like, yeah, call your jets. Let's go, let's go a bit slower because they get really confident. Oh my God, if it's worked for those, I want to go straight to that one. That's the one that's really bothering me. And then as a therapist, and every EMDR therapist, any therapist will then have to put the brakes on and
Yeah.
say, right, okay. And that's, particularly if you've got a client in front of you that's very enthusiastic and perhaps, just ready to go, it's then you have to gently remind
Mm,
them
mm.
because you don't want to deflate them.
No.
You want them, you have to gently remind them that there's a process and we have to follow the process because that it is an 8-step process with the
Yeah.
EMDR, and we have to install positive beliefs, and it's not just a matter of gung ho. Let's just go for it.
Yeah. But the trust is really important, though. Would you agree with that, Cam? They have to really, like you said earlier, the rapport and the trust with the therapist, because you really are holding an awful lot of trust in the person, in you guiding them and actually taking them to the right places as well. So I find that people, they do understand that, and then often, 9 times out of 10, they're very understanding of the need to go slowly or to take things at a time. They're very, I find most people very compliant with EMDR because they see the power of it really as well. So they understand, the need to trust the therapist, I think, and the therapist's wisdom, because it doesn't always go to plan either. Sometimes, like you say, things pop up that you don't
Mm.
expect to pop up, and then that can be quite a bit of a surprise to people as well.
Well, yes, and also, reprocessing you know, can be wonderful. You can walk out of the therapy room feeling like everything's amazing, or you can have the experience I did, which was you walk out of a therapy room and you're for however long between the first and second session, you can feel quite flat and your emotions can be
Mm.
going haywire. EMDR, it isn't, as I said, it's not talking therapy, it's emotion therapy. Therefore, I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Inside Out.
Mm.
It is very much that we are communicating with those emotions, and those emotions have been having a field day.
Mm.
They've been running around doing whatever they want to protect you. Of course, that's their job to make you the best version of themselves. And we go in there and go, hang on a minute, boys and girls, you need to just dial things down. So therefore, the reprocessing can be quite, for some people, can be the most difficult part.
Mm.
Emotions, it's like being at Alton Towers on the roller coaster. You can feel really high, you can feel really low, you can
Mm.
feel very tearful, anger may resurface,
Mm.
guilt may resurface because we've jolted things that have
Mm.
been in their place doing what they're doing. We've kind of gone, oh, hang on, shake you lot up for a bit. The first session, particularly, after the first session, second or third session, things will settle down.
Mm.
But that's where the trust is really important. And to
Mm.
have a therapist who kind of makes you feel that they can reach out between
Mm.
sessions.
Mm.
I often have
Yeah.
people contact me on WhatsApp, and I'm very clear that, look, if I'm with clients or if it's a Saturday night and I've had a glass of wine, I won't respond. It's just not going to happen. But I will come back to you
Mm.
as soon as I can because I want them to feel they can do that. I
Mm.
want them to feel if they're sat there and they're feeling on a low,
Mm.
I don't want them to feel alone. I don't want them to feel that they can't reach out
Mm.
because that can be quite a scary place to
Mm.
be.
I totally agree with you, Cam, and that's great. You provide that support between sessions. I mean, it's I understand you've got some boundaries there, but which you can't always be there for your clients. And I think that's obviously very important you say that. But to know, just to know that they can reach out is enough, isn't it, for them to do that? And again, I think what the other strength you bring to EMDR is you really explain it very well. So it sounds as though you tell them what to expect. So there's no sort of shocks, like you say, the way you described it about the Inside Out film is a really great example that people understand that their emotions might feel a little bit all over the place, and that's normal. It's part of the process. So once they know that, and then it happens to them, that's it. Cam told me this would happen, and therefore it's not a shock, or they don't feel out of control as well. So that sounds a really good thing that you provide for them.
Well, I think the other thing as well is that it gets people in the habit of journaling by
Hmm.
WhatsApping me. They're kind of journaling in a way, which is
Hmm.
great because we, at some point in the therapy journey, um, we will look back at the beginning, the first session. I often ask a question because I'm a very positive person. I will always ask, there's going to come a day where you're not going to need to see me anymore. What does that day look like for you? So I don't frame it as a goal because that can make it quite overwhelming. But I frame it as like, how do you want to feel? Where do you want to be? And there'll come a point where we'll look back, and that could be session 3, can be session 6, and I'll remind them of what they wanted to feel.
Mm.
And they're like, oh my gosh, I do feel like that now.
Mm.
I can't believe that's just happened in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. It's just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I've got, if they have WhatsApp me, I've got their journal, and I'll be like, right, I'm not going to keep this forever. I keep it while we're still working. But the day you don't see me anymore, I'm going to send you all of these, and you've got your journal. And actually,
Wow.
many of them continue journaling,
Yeah.
and it's actually quite wonderful to see. I get a lot of joy from that.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds a really interesting process. That's
Yeah,
so they contact you via WhatsApp, and then they've sort of got a record of what they're saying or what they're feeling. And
yeah.
then you collect that, and then at the end of the session you give that back to them, so they've got like a record of the process.
If they
Yeah.
want it, a lot of people don't
Yeah.
want it. A lot of people don't want to have it there, but that's not why I do. I actually do it for support. But over time, I found it's actually been really helpful to have as
Mm.
a journal for people. I kind of stumbled upon that really. It was
Yeah, it's
and
great.
yeah, which is great because sometimes when we're taking steps moving forward, we don't often look back. We don't look back at where we started.
Mm.
And when you're in the process and you're healing, those baby steps don't feel that significant. But when you then look from the beginning,
Mm.
you think, well, gosh, that was a leap.
Yeah.
And all right, it happened in baby steps, but I wanted to be here and I started here and I'm now here. And it's just, we are very hard on ourselves
Mm.
naturally.
Yes.
And we're not very good at looking in the mirror and going, well, actually, I look good today, or I think my hair looks nice today, or today is going to be a great day because I'm looking
Mm.
forward. We don't do that. We
Mm.
will compliment other people. We will often say, oh, you look lovely today.
Mm.
We don't do it to ourselves very often, and
No.
that's something that I do teach in with my clients, is to have a positive language towards themselves.
Mm.
And that's something I teach through self-hypnosis as well, which is comes
Yes.
in towards the kind of middle to end of the EMDR journey, when the
Yes.
healing really is in full flow.
Yes.
Um,
And I wanted to ask you some questions about that. Can I just ask you one more question about EMDR before we
of
move
course,
on
you
to
can,
the
yeah,
hypnotherapy?
yeah.
So you mentioned positive cognitions.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether you could perhaps explain to the audience what that is and how it works in EMDR, because people might not have heard of that phrase before.
Sure. So there are steps in EMDR. One of the steps, as we get towards coming towards the closure of the therapy, is to replace. If someone were to say, "Well, I'm not," as an example, I'm not a great mum,
Hmm.
and there's a memory. As we work towards the end and we've cleared the memory down, we would replace that "I'm not a great mum" to "I actually do my best as a mum, and my best is good enough."
Hmm.
You wouldn't necessarily go from "I'm not a great mum" to I am a great mum, because that takes time, but we would replace that negative view to a positive view. And then we would use either the tapping or the set. I tend to use self hypnosis over tapping,
Hmm.
because in my experience, people associate the tapping or the eye movement with bringing something down. And actually, the self hypnosis to take the positive cognition up seems to,
Mm.
it kind of separates the two
Okay.
ways of doing it. But traditionally, if you've got a very traditional EMDR therapist, they will use it eye movement or tapping to take the feeling out. And that's, down to the individual therapist. The reason I like the self hypnosis isn't something that people can take away with them. And often my clients that stick to doing the self hypnosis say it's been incredible. A lot of sports
Wow.
people use it. A lot of golfers. I'm learning to play golf at the moment, actually, and I know a lot of golfers use self hypnosis. they'll use hypnosis with a trained hypnotherapist, but they use self-hypnosis as well for lots of different reasons. Um, so yeah, positive cognition is really important because again, it's that language. You
Mm,
know, we talk about that famous book, the language of love, and we talk about the language we use towards our partners and towards our children. But what about the language we use towards ourselves?
mm,
That language is really important.
mm.
I
So
am,
important.
I am worthy. I am, good at what I do, or I am able to do this. That's really important.
Mm, very, very good. And yes, I mean, the other part of your role is hypnotherapy, Cam.
Mm,
So, what can you tell us a little bit more about what somebody would expect? I mean, you've just given an example of how you blend it with
mm,
the EMDR. I mean,
mm.
what would you expect from, would you just do hypnotherapy on its own, or do you blend them, or is it very much an individual thing?
I personally like to blend.
Hmm.
I have done hypnotherapy on its own for stopping smoking, for example,
Hmm.
but due to the power of EMDR, I've used the EMDR to bring down the craving.
Hmm.
When some people smoke, it comes from a place of stress or comes from a place of habit, so bring that down. So I do find the combination of the two modalities works really well together. In terms of hypnosis, within EMDR as well, if someone says to me, I feel this way, but I don't know where it's coming from,
Mm.
we may use hypnotherapy to just relax the conscious mind so we can find the memories and those memories can come forward. And I do explain this to people. There's this common misconception that hypnotherapy is you lose control.
Yes.
Because of stage hypnotics, as wonderful and as entertaining as they are a theatre show. They are, that's what they are. They're there to sell tickets and to create drama and to heighten the experience. What hypnosis actually is a increased sense of awareness. So contrary to belief that, oh, I'm going to lose control, you actually have more control because
Mm.
you're more in control with your subconscious mind. And that is a really powerful thing that can be used incredibly powerfully to achieve lots of things. I mean, I work with people in the TV world that will use self hypnosis before they go on set or they go on to a radio show or for whatever reason, they might be interviewing somebody who's a little bit kind of overwhelmed by, and they'll use self hypnosis. Um, so it can be used not only for healing, but also to achieve something where we might feel a bit blocked.
Mm. Okay. So it sounds as though, I mean, from what you're giving, you can do hypnosis with them as sort of as a blend with the EMDR, but you can also teach the skill of self-hypnosis. You sort of encourage the person to learn how to do it themselves. So that's like another skill they can take forward and again continue to use that throughout their lives. It sounds as though it's a very useful skill to have.
Yeah, I like to give people a toolbox.
Yes.
Um, just because as again, to just to go back to the fact I went through the process. For me, when I went through my process, I had to see somebody separate for EMDR, somebody separate for hypnotherapy, and I had to do a lot of sort of self reading to get the tools, what I wanted, and I wanted to combine that experience rather than have them as individual experiences
Mm,
because the combination of them works really well. I mean, to
mm,
empower somebody is just the most amazing feeling, and see how far someone comes, but then to know that it doesn't have to be even a trauma, sometimes we just feel stress in everyday life.
mm,
We
mm,
might have a meeting we're preparing for that makes us feel like we're out of our depth or we're not quite confident enough, and just using the self hypnosis quietens down
mm.
that noise and just allows you to focus on the thing that's really important.
Mm. It feels you really take people on a journey as well because they come to you and they've burdened by, even traumas they don't even know they've had, like you say, even the little t traumas, and they're burdened and it's sort of holding them back, and that could be very, very frustrating. But they process all those traumas so they're free of them. But also they've got like a tool to move forward. So if they want to sort of challenge themselves a little bit more and actually move forward and start doing, say, public speaking, for example, or being on TV, that is a big step for them. But if they've got the tool of the self hypnosis, that can take them even further forward, can't
Mm.
it? Because they've got that extra little bit of self help to help them to challenge them through, in the future, more difficult or more challenging things. To move forward, you have to do things that are quite scary, like you say, and the self hypnosis sounds really, really good to help people
Mm.
to deal with things in the future where they might not even think of doing them. They might, I can't never do that. But once they're free of their trauma, they're really moving on to do things that might really, really help them. Is
Yeah,
that?
life is not an exact science.
No, no,
You
no.
can have therapy and you can feel great, but then in 2 years' time something can happen. And yeah, and as I said, it doesn't have to be something big, it could be something really small. Something can happen. You've then got that skill that you've learned that you can lean on to empower yourself to, to go, wow, I could do that. I had a client recently that was doing a marathon, and they use self hypnosis to really build themselves up.
Mm.
To kind of, I know when I'm going to get to mile number 19, it's likely I'm going to want to shut down, and I've created. So within self hypnosis, I try to do it in a kind of fun way rather than a, you know overwhelming way. So
Mm.
I'll teach self hypnosis and then ask the person in front of me to just practice it. And then when they come back for the next session, we'll create little characters for the parts that they've got. So if they're feeling anxious about doing the marathon, we'll create a little character for that particular feeling and just have a little chat with the character and ask it to calm down. And that's really powerful.
Mm.
Because we are made up of parts. We do have lots of
Mm.
parts of us. I always say
Mm.
part of me wants to go out and part of me doesn't. We
Mm.
always say that, don't we?
Yeah, so right. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, part of me wants to go to the gym, a part of me really doesn't.
I can relate to that one.
Yeah. So yeah, again, it's
Yeah.
empowering. I love empowering people, and I love watching the journey. So yes,
Yeah.
I do take people on a journey, and it is wonderful to watch.
Yeah. And just that, I mean, people can't even know or expect what it feels like to learn such a powerful tool that they can take forward and use in so many different areas of their life, like you say, at work, meetings, dealing with the confrontation at work, but also taking care of themselves. Health or well-being comes into that as well, or like living your dreams, some sort of absolutely dream that they want to do, and they've got psychological barriers as what's sort of stopping doing their dream. Just by learning that self-hypnosis tool, sounds as though it can be useful in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's wonderful. I use it quite often. I've been a little bit slack recently, but I do use it quite often myself.
Mm.
With life every day. I'm a
Mm.
mum to two young people that are at university, and
Mm.
their challenges are different. I'm my eldest, my stepson. He's got married, and he's actually quite independent now. But
Yeah.
it's a different skill set.
Yeah.
Um, we sadly lost our dog recently, and I leaned
I'm
into self
sorry.
hypnosis. Yeah, it's horrible. But I leaned into self hypnosis there as well to remind myself that every time I think of him, I must train my mind to think of the good things.
Mm.
So that was really helpful for me personally
Mm.
to close my eyes, to go into that sort of lovely place and remember him doing lovely things,
Mm.
and the joy that he brought, and that is again, it's kind of rewiring your brain
Mm.
to think differently.
Mm.
And it's not actually that complicated. I think
Mm.
in the world we work in the mental health space, that everything seems quite complex, but there
Mm.
are simple things we can do to make big differences.
Mm. Mm. And also the power of the mind as well. It's sort of people can perhaps feel out of control of their mind, or their mind's controlling them, or their emotions are controlling them. It's something about getting back and feeling as though you're back in control, you're actually able to self-regulate your emotions as well, and actually do things which perhaps were holding you back before. It sounds as though it's like you say, it helps you to overcome complex or difficult emotions, like losing a very dear loved pet would be a great example you just given. But to actually feel as though it's still important to grieve that, but it's not overwhelming you as well. It
mm,
doesn't overwhelm you. Yeah.
mm. And it's really interesting what you said, because I often say that to my clients. I'll often say, at the moment, your emotions are in control of you. By the time we start getting to closure of this journey, you'll be in control of your emotions.
Mm,
As I always say, they're having a field day right now. They are doing whatever they want to do, and they're doing it from a place of love.
mm,
It's protection. They're looking for the danger, and they're always looking for the danger,
mm,
because that's how we are built to behave.
mm, mm,
But you're going to rein that in.
mm,
And you're going to then go, hang on, I'm starting to feel anxious. Where is that coming from? What can I do to calm that down?
mm,
We're always going to feel some sort of pressure or anxiety. That is life. There's
mm.
no, you know, there is no way to be on cloud nine every single day. There's just
No.
not. Things happen. So it's just about managing those things and when they happen. And the one thing I will say, if you find a technique, self hypnosis isn't for everybody. I can teach other
Mm,
things that help.
yeah.
The key is to do them regularly.
Mm,
I often find in the beginning, a client will say, I felt really like quite anxious, so I used self hypnosis, it didn't work.
mm,
And like the key is to use it before regularly, and the anxiety won't be as strong.
mm,
To try and use it when you're feeling anxious,
mm.
it's not a paracetamol.
No.
It's use it regularly, and the anxiety will learn. Your
Mm,
mind will learn that you don't want that feeling, so that feeling will start to come down,
mm.
and that's how it works.
And it's great that you can kind of, you know, see them to guide them. Like you say, sometimes it takes a while to learn any skill, doesn't it? You have to give
Yeah,
it time, and so if they try it once and it doesn't work, that can be quite sort of demoralizing. But they come
yes,
back to you, and you can sort of fine tune it, I think is what you're suggesting, and how to make it a bit better, or if it's not quite working, they've got your guidance and your expertise to help them to really, really refine that skill. Mm,
yeah. And again, I think as I've said before, I'm not textbook. I will do it in the way that works for the client. For some clients, if you
absolutely.
take them to a peaceful place, they'll get there and they're like, and then my mind just starts to wander. Like
Mm,
I'm there, but I'm thinking about a million things I've got to do. So then we have to find a skill to draw that in.
mm,
And that's when we probably go back to what we've talked about in the first session of what one of the questions was, what are your hobbies? What are your interests?
mm,
And then we'll go back to that. So like, while you're in that peaceful place, think about knitting
mm,
and what you're knitting. And that keeps those thoughts that are
mm,
overpowering, that
mm,
aren't, the bats away.
mm,
Again, you're training your mind to think of positive things
mm,
in a state of hypnosis, which is a heightened sense of awareness.
mm, mm. Yeah. The way you explain it, it sounds so accessible.
Mm.
And as soon as I think of knitting, I thought of knitting.
Yeah,
I was knitting away.
yeah, and that is it's important. It's intrusive thoughts can be really, really difficult for a lot of
Yeah.
people. Um, but once we find a way of switching that thought, and that thought
Yeah.
comes in and think about something else, something that brings us joy,
Yeah.
that thought has less power, and the less
Mm,
power it has, the less it will come back. So
mm, mm. Yeah. It sounds like you've got such a really good understanding of these skills and how to sort of help people to implement themselves, which sounds incredibly, empowering, Cam, when you describe it that way. So
well, as I
is
say, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, come out the other side.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So just to sort of summarize then, anything else that you think people might need to know about if they were to come and book an appointment with you? Any other sort of questions they might ask you about, uh, anything else that you think that they might ask you? I can't think. I think we've covered everything really, but I'm just wondering if there's anything else that is a common question that a person might ask.
Generally, no. I mean, I will get asked how it works, which I explain. How many sessions, which is difficult to explain because we don't
Yep.
know what's coming up. What am I likely to feel afterwards, which we've talked about. I do a presentation in the first session of why they're feeling that way,
Mm,
what's happening,
mm.
and that presentation is so wonderful because I think a lot of the time people come and they think they're the only one going through it.
Yeah.
And that presentation makes them realize that we are conditioned to feel this way. When we
Mm,
have a panic attack, that is our mind sending us a signal that
mm,
we need some help. And,
mm,
suicidal thoughts are more common
mm,
than we realize. People are always a little bit embarrassed to say that they've had
mm,
suicidal thoughts. But I always say if you've walked into a supermarket, I guarantee you probably 75% of people have had suicidal
mm.
thought at some point in their life
Yeah,
because
very
that's
much
how
so.
we're conditioned to
Yeah.
behave.
Mm.
But no, I can't think of anything else. I can only say that if someone has any questions or they
Mm.
can reach out, it's
They can
everybody's journey.
contact you. I've
Yeah,
got
they
I
absolutely
thought of
can.
one more question actually. Is there an age range for you, Cam? Is there do you take a from a certain age? Because I know a lot of young people have got a lot of mental health issues at the moment. Is there an age range you work with?
I will work with children and adults. I think as time's gone on, I personally have found EMDR, my niche is a little bit older.
Yep.
I seem to just, not that I prefer it, but I seem to lean into that more. In terms of younger people, because it's such an emotional therapy,
Yep.
young people aren't always completely aware of the emotions.
Mm,
I will treat younger people, but
mm,
it tends to be case by case.
mm. Okay.
Um, but yeah, generally, I'd never say no to anyone that needs help. But that's where the video consultations are really important because I will meet, even with the younger person, I will meet them before we do the therapy. I've had
Yeah.
great success with teenagers, particularly in the
Yes.
environment right now, mental health and
Yeah.
drugs, all that sort of stuff that's going on. I've
Yeah.
had great success with that. But that is it's really important that the person in front of me wants to do it. And often
Yeah.
when they're young, it might be the parent that wants them to do it and they're not
Yeah.
fully on board.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think it is, like just offering that free consultation and initially they can sort of meet you without any obligation and they can ask a few questions, I'm assuming, of, what to expect and everything like that. So it sort of gives a little bit of a taster, doesn't it? It's not a therapy session, but it gives an idea of what you're like as a person, doesn't it? So it can help people feel, do I feel I can connect with that person? I think was what you said originally. Can I connect with that
Yeah.
person? Yeah.
But it's
Okay, great.
equally as important for me as it is for the person on the other side
Yes.
because I want to know that I can do the best job that I can
Yeah.
for
Good.
them. And I do pride myself on the fact that all my reviews are 5 star, but that is for that reason because
Yeah.
it's therapy is very, you have to be very committed emotionally. It's
Mm,
also not cheap, for a lot of
mm,
people at times where we have a lot of other things that are demanding from us financially. It's really important to get the right therapist.
yes.
And that doesn't mean to say that I'm the right person for everybody. I'm
No.
not. Some people want more structure, don't want a slightly more holistic approach.
Mm,
I probably wouldn't be the right person for them because
mm,
I believe in the holistic approach. Other people may want an exact science on it's going to take 3 sessions and that's it.
mm,
Again, everybody's different, but it is important whoever you go with to feel really comfortable and to feel really safe and to
mm,
feel that your boundaries are respected because
mm,
it is a journey,
mm,
and it's a journey that I always say to everybody, it's a journey where you get to know yourself,
mm.
and that's
Yeah.
a really wonderful place to be, even though it's painful at times. It is a wonderful place to be.
I think just a final point, actually, but I think sometimes people almost daren't hope that their situation is resolvable. They've had this burden for such a long time, and the thought of actually being released from this burden, it's almost dare I hope this can go.
Mm.
Um, that's people can be in such a lot of pain and distress, and can I really believe this person can actually really help me? And it's quite hard
Mm.
as a therapist because obviously I do EMDR as well, is it works and you know how powerful it is, but that person in front of you doesn't know that, do they? They have to really have a lot of trust and hope in you that you will take them through that process.
Yeah, and I do say that particularly to clients that come to me and feel that way, is that I really believe in vibrations, and I really believe that our mind will deliver what we want it to deliver. So if we say to our mind, it's not going to work, it won't
Mm,
work.
mm,
And I am very honest about that. I'm very
mm,
honest that if that's how you feel, honestly, that you may as well
mm,
just burn your money and not invest your time, because your mind will deliver what you want it to deliver.
mm,
If you come with the thought process that, okay, I'm not sure that I really want it to work,
mm,
that vibration gets sent.
mm,
And your mind, it might not deliver it immediately because there's still a bit of a mixed message, but it will
mm,
do more to deliver it.
mm,
And that's how I believe
mm,
that it
mm,
works.
mm,
I always find this, I'm a runner, and I always find on the days that I set my goal, like, okay, 7 miles or 6 miles, whatever I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it, I do it. Other days when I go out and I'm sort of half-hearted, it is a struggle because it's obviously
It's like
often it's
life.
not it's not the physical that's letting me down. It's
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Cam, you've been an amazing guest, and thank you so much for explaining your practice in such a way which is so relatable and understandable. So, I just obviously, my last question is if people are interested in working with you, how do they get hold of you?
I'm really great at WhatsApp.
Hmm.
I'm not as brilliant as picking up my voicemails because I'm often with clients.
Yeah.
WhatsApps I can respond to later in the day. You can email me,
Mm.
you can DM me on Instagram. I'm not active on it, but I do keep an eye on everything going on there. So yeah, you can. WhatsApp is probably the best way to
So, is it
contact
just
me.
Cam Harris or
In terms of the website
the
is
website?
emdrharleystreet.com.
EMDRHarleyStreet.com. That will be in the show notes so people can actually relate to that when they actually listen to the podcast. So that will be there.
Yeah.
But it's, would you like to say it one more time just in case people missed it, Cam?
Well, I was also going to say that the website is emdrharleystreet.com.
Yeah.
You don't have to see me in Harley Street. You can see me online. About
Okay.
85% of my clients see me on Zoom now.
Yeah.
I do also have a clinic at home, which is where I am now.
Oh,
So there are options, and I'm based
yeah.
in East London.
Yes.
So there's options
Excellent.
there.
Yeah, that's thank you for saying that. Actually, really, we didn't even go into that, but I think just a final point is EMDR, and the only good thing that came out of COVID, I think, is people get more comfortable with remote. So EMDR is available on remote, so you offer that as a
Well,
service as
yeah,
well.
I think when some people don't like going to a clinic as well, in terms of going into Harley Street, if they're anxious, going into an actual clinic can make them more anxious, particularly
Yeah,
young children. Doing it on Zoom or doing it in my home seems just a little bit calmer.
yeah,
Yeah,
I get that. Yeah, I get
yeah.
that. Yeah. So, Cam, thank you so much for
Thank you.
your great wisdom and your great experience. And it's been lovely talking to you. So, thank you very, very much for being a guest. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.